Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another review. I'm your host, The Real FNA, and tonight I'm taking a look at a couple animated horror comedies from the late 1990s. Those films are Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. A little bit of backstory on this before I begin. I, like many others, grew up just loving Scooby-Doo, always having a good time watching it, always having a good time with my family and friends watching it. I couldn't get enough of it. Predictably, as I grew older, it quickly lost its lasting appeal to me and life went on. A few days ago, however, my sister and we were talking about stuff we loved growing up, like Transformers and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, amongst other things. And Scooby-Doo was the one that we talked about the most, especially on her end, because to this day she loves it to death. Then I asked a few other people I knew about stuff about Scooby-Doo that they like. And these two films were often brought up in discussion as a result. Very, very fondly remembered pieces of Scooby-Doo media. I myself remembered liking these two as a kid, but that was as a kid, so I'm curious to see how my thoughts will be today. After all, one of my favorite things to do is to look at something that I liked when I was younger and see if it still holds up to me today. And I'm gonna do just that. Bear in mind that most of the points that I talk about are going to apply to both of these films, but there are a few unique things that each of them excel in. So, let's start with the writing. And this is one of the things that caught me off guard a bit, because the writing is surprisingly good. Even for an adult seeing this with the thought of it being much worse. The basic synopsis behind Zombie Island is that the original Scooby-Doo cast sort of split up because they were tired of the monsters they were encountering just being guys in costumes, and then they rejoined to celebrate for Daphne's birthday, in hopes of catching like a real monster, which eventually leads to them to Moonscar Island, which is allegedly haunted and gives them more than what they asked for. The Witch's Ghost has the gang travel with a famous author to his hometown for a celebratory festival, which later turns into a mystery case regarding his great ancestor. Now, there are a few key plot points that I'm not going to mention, because, especially for a first-time viewer of these movies, if you haven't happened to see these movies, just in case, I'm not going to mention these. But for the people listening to this who happens to know what I'm talking about, I will say that later on in both of these movies, they do a fantastic job of surprising the reviewer. So, I'm going to leave it at that, because I feel like if I go into any more detail, I would be ruining what these films did in terms of said plot points. I feel like it would be a big waste. What I didn't expect to see in these films were small things and even small gags being used quickly early on, and then later on be used in a much more significant way that's part of the story and helps the characters find more things out. This happens more so in Zombie Island, and is definitely one of the best things about Zombie Island's writing. Whether it's more simple stuff like when Velma complains about losing the cleaning cloth for her glasses and then later sees that they were used to help make some voodoo dolls, or how this pig who was introduced earlier in the film chases after Scooby and Shaggy, which leads them into a ditch, which leads them into finding their first zombie and later on what's going on. The Witch's Ghost doesn't have as many of these, but are still pretty well done. Like when Scooby finds a buckle as a souvenir, and then that's later reincorporated as a film because they dig around the same spot to find a journal they're looking for. Another thing I think is cleverly done are little details and callbacks to the original television series. Like sometimes they'll have a song number or chase scene that feels right at home in the original series, and it adds a lot of charm to it, especially for longtime fans. Oh yeah, the humor. Yeah, I actually kind of like the humor in these movies. They actually made me laugh a few times. One of my favorite jokes is when Shaggy is driving away from the current threat, but Velma says, we gotta get the book, to which Shaggy responds with, "Can't we just wait for the movie?" I lost my shit when I heard that. And Another one I like is in Zombie Island. It's a cute visual of Scooby staring at an owl and imitating everything it does, even by twisting his neck all the way around. And I thought that was adorable. It made me smile. Even though I don't follow the franchise anymore, I always thought that there was an undeniable charm to it. Like, that no matter how bad Scooby-Doo ever got to me, that is something I can always praise it for. Its charm. With that said, though, I never in a million years would think that this shit would make me laugh as an adult. Let alone smile, but they did. I'd sooner expect a snowstorm during a summer day in fucking California. That's how rare I thought it was going to make me laugh, but surprisingly it did. It's actually pretty funny. But even though those films are funny, they also do horror pretty well. The original series was always pretty cheesy, all things considered, so to see these two do horror the way they did also surprised me. They have a very smooth and consistent pace. They're both about an hour and a half long, but it'll feel way faster because of the speed of these movies. It's like fucking cheetahs on crack. It starts off nice and familiar, but does a magnificent job of transcending into a much more haunting and downright hopeless tone by the end of the films. The monsters add on a lot to it. The visual and sound design behind them are all excellent at delivering scares for kids and even adults to a degree. I was on the edge of my seat by the end just to see what would happen next. I was pretty engaged in these films. I also really dig the characters this time. I genuinely like how natural the voice performances are and how dynamic the chemistry and dialogue is between the characters, compared to the flat, one-dimensional, lifeless archetypes that was in the original series. It feels a lot more fluent this time around. With what these two films delivered in characters and dialogue, it's like a chocolate fudge sundae, compared to the original series, which was like ripping your hair out, pouring sulfuric acid all over your scalp, and then jumping headfirst into a bed of spikes just to quicken your inevitable suffering. Okay, so music. This is easily the most brought up thing about these two films. Amongst what I've seen anyways, but I can't say I blame them for bringing it up so often, because the music is great stuff. The background music that plays during the scenes, it's nice, it never feels out of place for the film, and it works just as well as the tone does, as I mentioned earlier. The musical numbers are easily the best part of the music. Zombie Island has a few songs, like The Ghost Is Here and It's Terror Time Again. Both musically and especially lyrically fit in perfectly with the situations that were given while they play. The Witch's Ghost doesn't have that benefit of making the lyrics match the situation, but it does give us a new band of characters, pun totally intended, called the Hex Girls, who are later incorporated into the plot really well, and also have two great songs called I'm a Hex Girl and Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air. And they also have a couple of remixes of the original Scooby-Doo theme that plays during the beginning of both of these films, and once again, adds a lot of charm to it. Definitely made me smile. So with how many positives I've said about these films thus far, they must be perfect. Not necessarily. There are a few fuck-ups that I've noticed. A few inconsistencies, and a couple things that made me scratch my head. Like how Fred and Daphne think the Hex Girls are witches just because of their band personas. It's like, yeah, that's not jumping to conclusions at all. And especially in Zombie Island, where Fred is filming Daphne, and within the same sequence of footage, there's a quick cut that zooms in on Daphne, even though Fred is the only one there who has a camera and is filming. I get that it's meant to hide the ghost that plays into the film, but I think it would have been better to see Fred slowly zoom in on Daphne as she's talking, and then when the wind blows, and then he notices what the ghost did, have him point at what the ghost did. We also have a few characters that are less purposeful than the main ones. I don't want to call them flat out pointless, but they're definitely more insignificant compared to the main characters. I feel like they could have had a little bit more to them than just a temporary suspect or a contributor to the current scheme. With that said, I think that those are the most glaring issues we have, though. Maybe a few others that aren't fresh on my mind right now, but even if there are, all of that is overshadowed by how well these films are made. So, when all is said and done, am I able to recommend Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost? You bet your fucking ass I can. These films are wonderfully made horror comedies. The writing is mostly good. The animation looks nice. I didn't bring up the animation. Animation looks great. The music, fucking fantastic stuff. Very quick pacing. It never feels like it drags on at any moment. And the tone has a fantastically smooth shift over the course of these films. I'm not sure which one I prefer, but that doesn't matter because both of them are great. Whether alone or with others, Zombie Island and The Witch's Ghost hold up very well as entertaining films, whether you're young or old. And that does it for another review. Once again, I was really surprised at how well these films have aged. I know I enjoyed them as a kid, I loved them as a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore, and as an adult, these films still hold up incredibly well. Probably even more, I would say, despite its flaws. So, until next time, guys, thank you all for watching, take care, and I will see you all in the near future. Peace.